So our constitutional change and governance reform journey started in 2010. The precipitating factor was our strategic plan of 2009-2011 that earmarked our constitution needed updating and our communication with our members wasn't up to scratch. Our constitution had last been updated in 1988, so that was quite a few years that our constitution was. I can see someone laughing me. Are you resonating with yours? Anyway, so obviously we had to get something done then. The board at that stage was made up of 6 directors. The directors were appointed from a technical council and a venue council. The technical council was made up of regional squash associations, and under that were 5 metro and 8 country associations, and the squash and racquetball clubs fed into that. The venue council was made up of squash owners, squash venues, and 3 were elected from that. It was, at that point, quite a closed affair of election. The feedback was that no one knew who was up for election. It was, once you were on these committees, they didn't know how to get onto these committees, and once they were there, it was basically, oh, well, do you want to stand? Okay, fine, you're up for election. So it wasn't really a robust way of getting directors onto the board. So that precipitated the change. Going with that, Deakin University had a research grant for non-for-profit sporting organisations that were going on a governance reform journey. So we applied for the grant and we were fortunate enough to be part of the journey. Deakin worked with Squash and Racquetball Victoria for 18 months, and the consultative process was done through participation observation, so they would come to board meetings and watch our board, the directors, how they communicated with us, documentation and analysis, interviews, one-to-one interviews with people, and workshops. So this whole process took 18 months, a lot of consultation with the Squash and Racquetball Victoria community at large, and the Deakin aspect was quite important because the then board didn't want the CEO that was employed to lead the governance process change. So we were really fortunate that we had an independent body doing this for us. So out of this consultation process, 3 things were earmarked for Squash and Racquetball Victoria. First of all, the tier system, the association tier system, they wanted to do away with that and just have our players and our members being able to vote. They wanted to introduce a hybrid system, so there would be 3 nominations from players and officials, 3 from venues, and 3 independent directors. And there was also a sunset clause proposed to cap the sunset clause for 3 years or 3 consecutive terms. So in effect, you only had 6 years on the board of Squash and Racquetball Victoria. So after all this consultation process, an EGM was called, and we invited the broader Squash and Racquetball community to come to the meeting, and lo and behold, 18 months of work was vetoed. This came as an enormous shock to the organisation and obviously the directors, that all these proposals that had been put forward had just been, they vetoed them. Anyway, so after an emergency meeting, another EGM was called a month later, and the hybrid system actually went through. So we had the 9 directors, as I just explained to you. The sunset clause unfortunately didn't get through, so we still have that in our constitution. The board then resigned, but they were obviously welcome to stand for nomination again, and we only had 1 person that elected to do that. So the second stage of our journey takes us from 2013, and I may just add that the documentation that Deakin then developed for us, they wrote their paper, but in doing so, we got nomination forms developed, role descriptions for people who wanted to join the board. So you wrote a bit of a blurb about who you were and why, what skills you thought you brought to the board or would bring to the board of Squash and Racquetball Victoria. The next phase of our journey, 2013 to 2014, we actually found that the hybrid system hadn't worked as well as we anticipated. Often our meetings, all our meetings are after hours, and our venue owners couldn't always participate in these meetings, and when we put motions forward, they couldn't be passed because the venue owners weren't there. So it was put forward that we changed the structure of our directors, so we had 7 directors and 2 appointed directors, and that actually, that was passed, so that's our board structure at the moment. Deakin University then went further with us, and we developed, yes, they did a board charter for us, so just basically explaining what your board roles are, how it all fits in, and with that we also started getting our subcommittees organised. So as opposed to tennis here, we don't have a nomination committee because our organisation just simply isn't big enough. And up until that point, the AGM of 2012, we actually struggled to get people to come to our AGM because the players viewed it as such a closed shop, and that was sort of a pointless exercises coming to our AGM. The board quota initially with the 6 directors was 5-1. Currently, and from 2013, we were basically 50-50. So our structure, we don't seem to struggle to attract women to our board positions. We also are slightly different in that we do go out of our way to approach people and earmark them when we think we want them on the board. So in terms of the last phase of our governance review, 2015, this was in conjunction with Vicsport. A board evaluation document was produced that we actually have a look at our skills base that we have on the board, and a report was produced from that. So we could earmark where we had issues. So if we didn't have enough accountancy experience, we didn't have legal experience, etc., etc. So Peter Murphy, who was the president from 2013 to 2016 and has just stood down just from the board now, was a barrister. So obviously we're looking for lawyers. So any lawyers in the room, like, put up your hand and I'll contact you. We've got a lot of accountants. So basically we will do a re-evaluation of our first board meeting is on the 10th of April, and I'm standing for re-election that year. This is my first year that I finished as president, and prior to that I was vice president of Squash and Racquetball Victoria. We haven't actually written it into our constitution that it is mandatory to have a 50-50 ratio, because sometimes it's just not possible to do it. Our philosophy, it is, we recommend it, but it's not mandatory. The word mandatory isn't in our constitution. And Just finally, the Australian Sports Commission and mandatory governance principle were guiding us through this whole journey. So I think in terms of governance in sporting organisations and smaller sporting organisations in Victoria, we are certainly happy to have conversations with you. We've got a very, very good governance structure, and it's very strong, and we've had a lot of help. So Vicsport, thank you very much. And I think that's about it. Thank you.